with the First Lady of Israel, and then the follow-on conversation with President Herzog of Israel. First of all, on your first question, allegations have been made. You're right about the atrocities committed on October 7, clearly by Hamas. There's a lot of evidence that points towards the sexual crimes that were committed, and so the $1 million that has been set aside to help Israeli women, survivors, and just the support for recovery counseling, etc., is clearly identified. There have also been allegations made of sexual and or gender-based violence towards Palestinian women, not with as direct an attribution. The position of the minister on this is that when a woman comes forward and makes such allegations, we should believe the woman first and foremost, and investigate, always investigate. So the money, the second announcement that was made was to be in support of these women, but of course allegations will need to be pursued and investigations will need to be done.
So we have no idea who committed those sexual crimes of sexual violence. We have no idea?
And there's no precision yet.
Okay, that's helpful. In terms of UNRWA, just to set the record straight, my understanding is that and the dates, I don't have them in front of me. But Minister Hussein announced that we would be pausing future funding to UNRWA more recently in March, and that was December 6th. If I remember, don't take my date here. But several weeks ago, if not months, Minister Hussein announced that we would pause funding to UNRWA, future funding, because of allegations of 12 employees that were involved in October 7 attacks. More recently, in March, Minister Hussein unpaused the future installment. So just to be very clear in terms of, and I'm not asking on that specific issue, but on the issue, because I think there's a lack of clarity in Canada and for Canadians about our humanitarian aid to Gaza in this conflict. We, in my understanding, never actually, we did pause future payments, but that payment was not due until a point when, until a future date. So in reality, to support humanitarian endeavors, we have increased funding, and the funding for UNRWA was never cut, although there was we were going to do so if we did get down to the issue. Is that correct? So we did increase.
Over time, it's now 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Thank you. So we next go to Madame Normandin. You have 4 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today. Thank you, Mr. Lebec, for your commitment to providing the documents that were sent to the committee. However, I would like to comment that on the 6th of December last, the committee asked for written answers on the voting process within the United States and on export permits, and we're still awaiting answers to our questions. Now, my first question today has to do with the blockade. Israel has imposed a blockade on essential goods since the beginning of the conflict, and resources only go in occasionally through Rafah. Now, the Department of Foreign Affairs has never said that Israeli actions on this violated international law, despite the famine that is resulting from this. So I'd like to know what the current position is of the department. Are these actions a breach of international law? Well, I'll begin by your first comment. You have my personal commitment to come back to you with this if questions were asked on the 6th of December that were not answered. So I can assure you that we will provide that as quickly as possible. Now, in terms of Canada's position on internet, or rather humanitarian assistance in Gaza, regardless of the words that are used to describe the current situation, this current situation is dramatic and unprecedented. The human suffering is unprecedented, and we must do everything in our power in order to facilitate the delivery of essential goods, whether it be via road or other. And our position is that Israel should open as many roads as it can in order to get that humanitarian aid to Gaza. We've also been doing airdrops through Jordan, or contributing rather, and we have contributed as well to the maritime corridor established between Cyprus and Gaza. So it's on all those levels that we are acting and that we want to support. Well, you're not necessarily confirming that there is a violation of international law, but my second question is this. In November, following Hamas's actions, the government expressed its hope that Israel would be restrained in its response. Do you feel that Israel has had a restrained response, whether it did or is currently? Well, that's a question of how you interpret what is happening and how you describe what is happening. The violence that has taken place has had a huge humanitarian impact. And we are exerting pressure on many levels, whether it be working groups, ministerial levels, etc., within Israel, in fact, to make sure that as much restraint as possible is exerted, because these are dramatic circumstances. More can be done. Now, in terms of Israel's actions, has the Minister of Foreign Affairs already drawn a red line that must not be crossed? I wouldn't necessarily say that any of these steps are a red line, except that there have been fundamental principles that have been outlined. And so I understand that there will not be a red line that is established. Well, not one that has been formulated as such yet.
Go to MP McGregor. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Levesque, I just want to run through the numbers to ensure I have them correct. Did you say it was 7 employees from UNRWA who were implicated in the interim report?
I believe it was 12.
Sorry, 12. Okay, and that's out of a total organization strength of around 30,000?
33,000 overall, 13,000 in Gaza.
The Leader of the Opposition recently referred to UNRWA as a terrorist organization. Does Global Affairs Canada feel it's reasonable to hold an organization that employs 33,000 people accountable for the actions of 12 of its members? Does the department share the view that that's the correct terminology to use in this case?
The department considers UNRWA to be a UN organization or sub-body that belongs to the UN family.
Is the department aware of any of our major allies that hold that view, holding the entire UNRWA organization accountable for the actions of 12 of its employees?
None that I'm aware of. No other country has referred to UNRWA as a terrorist organization.
Thank you for getting that on the record. Human Rights Watch has argued that the demise of UNRWA would be catastrophic for Gaza. Does the Government of Canada share that view? And to add some context, how do you place UNRWA in terms of its ability to deliver aid to the people of Gaza?
We believe that UNRWA is an absolutely essential organization in the current context to be able to deliver humanitarian assistance to people in grave need in Gaza, not just because of the internal networks that they run to be able to deliver humanitarian assistance, but because they are also the organization that other humanitarian actors use inside Gaza. The World Food Program could not deliver its food to Gazans if it wasn't for UNRWA. UNICEF could not reach the children they need to reach if it wasn't for UNRWA. So it is an organization that is really the backbone of humanitarian assistance in Gaza.
And to be clear, when you're talking about grave need, we're referring to catastrophic destruction of necessary infrastructure, lack of access to medical supplies, to food, to basic shelter. Am I correct in outlining those?
That would be
very
correct.
Broadly. Thank you. You mentioned in your opening statements about Israel's right to defend itself, and I think everyone around this committee understands that right is afforded to any nation state around the world. I guess what I want you to help me understand is in the destruction that's going on in Gaza and the catastrophe that we're all witnessing day by day that's happening and being inflicted on the Palestinian people that live there, at what point does the government of Canada's understanding of the right to defend itself transition? Is Israel still meeting that defined right to defend itself with the destruction that's going on in Gaza right now?
What I would say, Mr. Chair, is that Israel really is at war right now. It is at war with Hamas. I can tell you, having stood 3 kilometers from the border with Gaza, that I could hear gunfire, automatic rifles going off. That's not civilians fighting the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. That is a terrorist organization. We could hear artillery fire going in. So that war really is happening right now. It continues. The position of the government, and certainly the analysis of the department, is that maximum restraint, consideration for civilian life must be a consideration at all time. And we've seen phenomenal destruction, grave human suffering that we have called out and said numerous times that should be reduced, should be brought to on both sides. The violence has to stop. It is very difficult to give you an exact measure, but the trend and generally what Canadians and what this government has advocated for is a lowering of the temperature, is lessening of violence, and is increased consideration for civilians and human life in Gaza.
We next go to MP Chung. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada's long-standing, many decades-long position has been to recognize the State of Israel, with which we've had diplomatic relations for decades. It's also been our long-standing position not to recognize the State of Palestine, but to recognize that state if it culminates as the result of negotiations between the State of Israel and the Palestinian people. Does the Government of Canada believe it's time to change that long-standing position and to immediately recognize the State of Palestine?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, this is obviously a policy decision that will need to be made by the Minister and the Prime Minister speaking as representatives of the government. What I can tell you from the department's side is that the position has been and remains that the only way forward out of this conflict ultimately is by having 2 states living side by side. The recognition of a Palestinian state at some point in the continuum, we believe, should happen. If you look at the Oslo Accord, the final stage was
agreed.
supposed to be the recognition of the Palestinian state.
So at some point, a continuum presumably excludes at the beginning of the continuum.
It can be anywhere in the continuum. I think what is important is
So the process should start with the recognition of a Palestinian state?
not necessarily,
Okay.
but there is a continuum there.
Yeah, but the advice from the department, I assume, is not to begin with the recognition of a Palestinian state, but rather to have the 2 parties sit down through the difficult process of negotiations, and perhaps at some point along that continuum, as you call it, potentially recognize a Palestinian state. Is that the advice, as I understand it?
The advice of the department is, of course, protected and has to go to the minister that I cannot disclose in this committee hearing.
Fair enough. I have a question related to humanitarian aid for Palestinians in Gaza. Recently, the El Mathia initiative was announced. Canada isn't part of that initiative, which is to use naval transport, maritime transport, to carry aid from Cyprus to the Gaza Strip. Why isn't Canada part of this initiative?
Mr. Chair, Canada has announced that it would be part of this initiative and will contribute and is in talks right now.
But I guess why weren't we part of the joint statement? And if we are going to be at some point part of the initiative, what assets are we bringing to bear to be part of the initiative?
Right. Well, that's exactly what's being discussed right now. I think in the first instance, it will be in supply of